Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of my 2021 garden favorites. In this series of videos, I am focusing on my favorites from the 2021 garden here in my Zone 6A Ohio garden. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already, and there will ultimately be 4 videos total in this series. So because the first video got a little bit longer than I intended, I'm breaking up today's segment into 2 sections. So today I'm going to focus on my favorites from the early summer garden, and next time will be favorites from the late summer garden, followed up of course by fall favorites. And of course I have to kick off today with many a gardener's favorite summer crop, and that is tomatoes. And these were some of my early ripening favorites. So the very first one I want to mention is Midnight Snack. This was the first tomato to ripen in my garden this year. And this is an indigo type tomato. I had 7 other indigo varieties planted this year because I wanted to do a comparison in terms of flavor and plant health and indigo coloration in all of these different varieties. So the others that I had planted comparing to Midnight Snacks were Indigo Blueberries, Dancing with Smurfs, Indigo Cherry Drops, Indigo Rose, Indigo Apple, Clackamas Blueberry, and Helsing Junction Blue. I think I caught all of them there. And Midnight Snack ended up being by far and away the favorite in terms of flavor, productivity, plant health, and nice deep indigo coloration. Everyone that I had taste this tomato was pretty blown away by the rich, complex flavor that this variety features, which is somewhat surprising in such a small tomato. Now, what really struck me about the flavor is that you could actually get 2 completely different eating experiences depending on when you picked these fruit. So picked a little bit under mature when that red coloration on the underside wasn't deep, dark scarlet yet. Midnight Snack was sweet, tart, quite acidic, and very refreshing. But when picked at peak maturity, that acidity mellowed out somewhat for a really rich, full-bodied eating experience. Now I know that sounds a bit like I'm describing wine. I promise I won't go into the oaky undertones and the hints of summer berries, but it really was a good tasting tomato. And I did want to mention that Midnight Snack is a vigorous indeterminate. So this one did really, really well on my cattle panel trellises. I would not try to grow this one without some serious support for it to climb up. Now the next 2 tomatoes I want to mention are 2 very, very similar varieties from Simo Seeds. And thank you to the viewers in my last video that pointed out my error. Simo is a Czech company, not a Hungarian company. And these were some that I was able to trial. They're not available in the US yet, but I'm hoping that they come to market here soon because they're really great varieties. This year I was doing a trial to try to find a replacement for the early girl variety, which is being discontinued in the future. So I was looking for a medium-sized red round tomato with the primary goal of early maturity. And what I found this year is that early doll was actually the closest variety to early girl, but I liked these 2 varieties, Marienka and Darinka, much better because they were ripe weeks earlier than either early doll or early girl. They had these very, very compact determinate growth habits and put on a ton of fruit for the size of the plant. Now the fruit size itself was a little bit on the small size, about 4 to 6 ounces, but they had really great flavor for such an early tomato. And what was really nice for me here was that these plants were fully grown and throwing mature tomatoes before the really serious diseases in my area set in this summer. So I was able to get a crop before the blights and the septoria leaf spots and all of those types of things really set in. And the final early ripener this year was a new variety called Bendita, carried by Totally Tomatoes. And this is a very early, nice big size orange fruited variety. Bendita is a beautiful, brilliant tangerine orange variety right around 6 to 8 ounces in my trials and had a great flavor. A nice balance of sugars and acidity, a good meaty texture without being mealy or mushy. Just the perfect kind of tomato for slicing up on tomato sandwiches or into salads, or my favorite way of eating my garden fresh tomatoes, which is just slicing them and sprinkling them with a little salt. I really enjoy the eating quality of Bandita. The other nice thing is that this is a semi-determinate plant. So you get some of the advantages of both a determinate and an indeterminate. This one is a little more compact and manageable than your typical indeterminate plant, reaching to about 5 to 6 feet tall. But unlike your typical determinate that will set a crop and then stop producing, this one continues to set fruit throughout the summer, so you get an extended harvest. This variety is also supposed to be high in beta carotene. The next early summer crop is cucumbers, and cucumbers would be very easy for me to grow here in Ohio if it were not for one of the insect banes of my existence, which is cucumber beetles. Cucumber beetles unfortunately vector the pathogen that causes bacterial wilt, which can wipe out an entire crop of cucumbers and other cucurbits in a matter of days. So I'm always on the lookout for varieties that the cucumber beetles don't seem to favor, as well as very early varieties that I can get a crop off of before that bacterial wilt sets in. Now, the cucumber beetle pressure this year was extraordinarily high, so I was very happy with whichever cucumber varieties made it through. And I had 3 that did quite well this year. All of these are available from Gurney's Seed. And the first one I want to mention is Daphne, and it's a pickling cucumber. And this one I loved because it was extraordinarily early. It was very, very productive. It's also a parthenocarpic type, so if you wanted to grow it in like a hoop house or a high tunnel, or if you just are growing in an area where you have a lack of pollinators, this one will set fruit in those conditions. Daphne makes great crispy, crunchy pickles. The nice thing though is that it's also great for fresh eating. It has no bitterness. I did peel the skins because they have those typical kind of warty, spiky pickling skins, but it really made for a great fresh eating cucumber as well. The next variety is another pickler called Supermax. Now this variety is a bit later, but it's got great disease resistance and it was highly productive. What struck me first about Supermax was its appearance. I have never grown a deeper, darker, healthier looking cucumber. This variety just has a really nice dark green skin. It's also got a darker green flesh, and it's got these really, really blocky uniform cucumbers. So everything I picked was pretty much the same size and the same shape, which if you're doing pickles, especially if you're doing whole pickles, is really, really nice. The other thing is that Supermax has a bit of a different texture. It's much denser and crunchier than a typical cucumber. It seems to have a lower water content, which again, for pickling, makes for a really nice pickle because those pickles are going to retain their crunch even after processing. This one also was good for fresh eating. It had a bit of a different flavor than my typical cucumbers, and usually there's not a whole lot of difference other than some of them are a little bitter and some of them aren't. But Supermax actually had this really unique, almost savory, melonish flavor, which is a little different than I'm used to. So that one was really fun. And the final cucumber winner this year was a variety called Ophelia. And for fresh eating, I don't think you can beat a bait alpha type. And Ophelia was no exception to this rule. It is a bait alpha cucumber with extremely delicate, thin, non-bitter skin, very few seeds, and an exceptionally crisp, juicy texture. Ophelia, again, was a very, very early producing variety. And this one you can actually harvest at little baby snacker size or let them get full size before harvesting. Cucumbers are one of my kids' favorites, and perhaps unfortunately I have turned them into little cucumber snobs with all of the different varieties I try. So they're very particular about which cucumbers they want to eat, and Ophelia was definitely a kid favorite this year. And what would the summer garden be without flowers? This year I was really pleased with 2 new dianthus varieties that I tried, and these are both from the same series called Jolt. And I grew the cherry jolt and the purple jolt. These are a Pan America Seed introduction, and right now the cherry is available from Harris Seed. I look for the purple to be available soon. And what is unique about this series is this is the most heat tolerant interspecific dianthus. So these will grow and bloom and flourish in the heat of summer. So here in my Ohio summers, which are fairly hot and humid, these things bloomed and bloomed and bloomed and did not quit until the frost. The plants were very healthy and disease resistant, and they had the type of color that just kind of glows in the right light. The butterflies seem to love them. The only thing to note is that this is not like an old-fashioned cottage garden dianthus type, so it doesn't have that intense, intoxicating fragrance, just a very light fragrance. Xochi Marigold is another Pan America Seeds introduction, currently available from HPS Seeds. And Xochi was actually bred with the specific usage of being used as decoration for Dia de los Muertos celebrations. But it makes a spectacular addition to the garden as well. It's a cutting type, so it's going to be taller. The plants get about 3 to 4 feet tall with 24-inch stems. And it started blooming very, very early in my garden and bloomed right up until that first hard frost. The thing that made me fall in love with Xochi though is the color. They have these big 3 to 4 inch fully double blooms that are a glowing, intense orange that contrast beautifully against the deep, dark, kind of bluish green foliage. Again, it's another one of those flowers that when you go out into the garden at around dusk, that color just kind of glows. Another favorite that I grow every year is Miss Jekyll Nigella, or Love in a Mist, and this one is an oldie but a goodie. It actually received an award from the British Royal Horticultural Society back in 1895. I love, love, love Love in a Mist because it's one of those flowers that, despite its extraordinarily delicate appearance, it's super tough and it's super easy to grow. Basically, you just sprinkle some seeds on the ground and this thing will pop up, and it readily self-sows. It's also very easy to collect your own seeds because this sets really cool looking little balloon-like seed pods that can be easily collected at the end of the season. And my final early blooming summer favorite is Jasmine Scented Nicotiana, and this one is available from Adaptive Seeds. This is another variety that's very easy to grow, readily self-sows. Are we noticing a trend in my flower preferences here? I like the ones that are easy to grow. I didn't even actually plant this variety in 2021. I had them planted in 2020, and the plant self-seeded and came back readily the following year. Nicotiana forms large, lush plants, but the real allure with this one is the fragrance. True to its name, this Nicotiana has an intoxicating jasmine-like scent. And one thing to note is that Jasmine Scented Nicotiana is what they call a night bloomer. So it really comes into full bloom starting at about dusk. And it is such a treat to be working out in the garden after the heat of day is gone and the whole area is just filled with this wonderful fragrance. I think a great option would also be to plant these under a window that you often have open because that scent would kind of waft inside as the evening progressed. Beans, of course, are a summer garden staple, and the first bean variety, Derby bush bean, is on regular rotation in my garden. For years and years, I grew a variety called Cupidon, and it was my absolute favorite in terms of eating quality. And I've actually replaced Cupidon with Derby. Now, Derby is a little bit bigger bean. They grow to about 7 inches and still stay totally smooth and stringless. But what I've really liked about Derby is the reliability. These plants stay healthy in the garden and they just produce and produce and produce. And they really have a nice, rich, green beanie, for lack of better terms, flavor. I tried a couple of runner beans this year as well, and my exposure to runner beans in the past was really just as an ornamental. A lot of folks around this area grow the old scarlet runner bean, and they grow it for the beautiful red flowers that attract hummingbirds. But no one I know really eats the pods or uses them as an edible. The first variety I tried this year was a variety called Chocolate from Fruition Seeds, and I was instantly enamored with it when I opened the packet of seeds because they produce what look like magical beans. These great big beans that are all different colors, from deep chocolate brown to cream and lilac with these dark speckles. Really just a beautiful seed. These are vigorous climbers, and I planted these along the edge of my garden fence and allowed them to climb. and they produce these beautiful bicolor red and white blooms that, again, the hummingbirds love. But I was amazed by how good the pods actually were. They have a much more rich flavor than my typical garden green beans that I grow, and I really, really enjoyed these, even just eating them raw right off of the plant in the garden. The second runner bean was a variety called Golden Sunshine from Gurney's Seed, and this one is just a knockout. It has vibrant chartreuse foliage that contrasts amazingly with these bright scarlet blooms. And it's got great pod flavor as well. I didn't think it was quite as productive as the chocolate was, but man, you can't beat it for an edible ornamental type dual usage plant. And finally, another old favorite, Dragon Tongue Bean from Seed Savers Exchange. And this one's actually a hand-me-down favorite from my dad. This is one that he grows every single year, and I started growing it as well. If you like your beans big and fat and meaty, Dragon Tongue is the variety for you. These set big, flattened, fat pods with this lovely light yellow coloration striped with purple. They're very, very striking. They're also very easy to pick because they stand out against the green foliage. Unfortunately, that purple coloration fades or completely disappears when you cook it, but the flavor is exceptional. This one also gives very, very high yields because that pod size is practically double your typical green bean, so you get more production in less space with this variety. Onto my early summer herbs. You may have heard me rave about this one before. This year I grew another Spilanthes or toothache plant variety. This one was called Peekaboo, and Spilanthes is also known by an assortment of fun nicknames like Buzz Button or Electric Daisy, but seriously, this is such a cool herb. It's named for its ability to cause a temporary tingling or numbing sensation in the mouth when you chew the little flower buds. And historically, it's been used for a lot of different medicinal purposes. Now, in recent years, bartenders have started adding the buzz buttons to trendy cocktails, such as the famous verbena cocktail featured at the Chandelier Bar in Las Vegas. And while I've yet to go to Las Vegas and try the verbena cocktail, I have used mine medicinally. So last year I made a tincture of the flower buds and used those as a gargle to effectively rid myself of a sore throat earlier this winter. Not nearly as glamorous as sipping cocktails in Vegas, but hey. Now, the noteworthy thing about this Peekaboo variety is that the foliage is a deeper bronzy green color, which contrasts really nicely against the flower buds, which are gold with a red eye, making it more showy than your typical yellow toothache plant. An herb that's on repeat in my garden every year is Everleaf Emerald Towers Basil, available from Gurney's Seed. The first year that I grew this variety was in 2018, and it has been a staple in my garden ever since. This plant forms a really nice structural kind of upright plant, hence the name Emerald Towers, and it makes a really nice backdrop to annual flowers. It works well in containers, and it does have a standard Genovese basil flavor. I find that the texture is a little tougher than some other basil varieties, so this one I use in recipes where the basil is thrown at the end and gets cooked lightly. It also makes a great pesto, but the thing that makes this variety a staple in my garden is the bolt tolerance. So this variety goes to flower anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks later than standard basil. That is a huge difference. Usually when we talk about bolt tolerance in herbs, it's like a factor of a couple of weeks, not 2 to 3 months. Now, another basil I wanted to mention, this is the first year I've grown this one, is Prospera basil from Johnny's. And this is a standard large leaf sweet Genovese type. This one has excellent flavor and a more tender texture than the Everleaf Emerald Towers. But what is really special about Prospera is it has downy mildew resistance. Now, if this is not a disease that is an issue where you live, this will not be a big deal. But here in my growing area, downy mildew is probably the #1 taker-downer of basil in the summer. So downy mildew is a pathogen that will cause little fuzzy gray spores to form on the bottom of the basil leaves, eventually making them inedible. And it favors warm, humid conditions, which is basically all our summers are comprised of. So downy mildew is a big deal every year. And in a year where there's a lot of pressure, I might be lucky to get one cutting off of my basil before it succumbs to this disease. So having a variety that has resistance is a big deal. And Prospera did stay healthy and happy the entire season this year, and I was able to keep harvesting until the frost. And to wrap up my early summer favorites, I have to mention one pepper. Most of my peppers don't color up and mature until much later in the summer. This one was a very early variety. This is called Basket of Fire. And this one is from the breeding program of Vegetalis, now owned by Syngenta. Now I haven't been able to find a gardening catalog that has picked this one up yet, but I have a suspicion that this variety will be popping up as potted plants in garden centers this summer. Basket of Fire is a really fun little variety. So this one was bred to be grown in containers, and it forms this really nice, bushy, compact little 12-inch plant. Now, given the size of this plant, I was shocked by how many peppers this actually set, and they are quite pungent. They have a spicy little kick to them. And this plant is great because it can so easily double as an ornamental. So you could tuck this in with your flower plantings, you can do mixed containers. It has a really beautiful plant habit and these lovely upright facing conical peppers, which color change from kind of cream to yellow to deep gold, orange to red, and you get all of those colors on the same plant at the same time. So that wraps up my early summer 2021 favorite varieties. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the next segment featuring late summer favorites. And I would love if you all would drop a line in the comments letting me know either a new variety that you tried in 2021 that you loved, or something that is kind of on repeat every year in your garden. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.